The Joining the Dots podcast focuses on the many challenges facing education and how different approaches and innovations are needed to meet those challenges.
Join co-hosts Matt Jessop and Kingsley as they have discussions with innovative educators, business leaders, policymakers, and other stakeholders, and guests looking at transforming the future of education.
Now, if that wasn't a quality introduction to our inaugural episode, I don't know what was. Matt, you're scratching your chin there because we kind of played with the idea of our intro, didn't we?
That's a bit of cheese, and I like that. I've heard far worse than that.
Quality cheese.
I do think we should consider Last of the Summer Wine now as a theme tune as well.
Well, in the spirit of three getting older gits chatting about life and education, I can't think of a better person to join us for our first episode, Matt, than the one and only Dan Fitzpatrick.
The AI man, the first AI man, the leading AI man, I'd say. I think internationally as well.
That's quite an introduction, Dan.
Yeah. I wasn't quite sure if I was in there for you. There's some podcasts you're kind of on the screen, but you're not in until they bring you in. But I'm in. That's great.
You are here, yeah.
No, thanks. I guess. Yeah, I mean, I've known you guys a lot for a while now, and I suppose like my kind of passion has always been kind of we can probably do things a bit differently in education, and let's test some stuff out and let's see what we can do. And there's been multiple opportunities to do that over the years, and I suppose the kind of the bringing forth to the front of generative AI and lots of people using AI is, I suppose, it's another way for us to go, look, things are changing a lot out there. Things are starting to really move out in the mainstream, and already I think we should probably be asking the question: are we preparing our students for that world? And now with the progress that we're seeing with artificial intelligence in the world, are we going to slip even further behind? So, I mean, I love technology. I think when it's used in the right way and with the right values, that it can be a powerful force. I worked a bit with AI, and then so I wrote a book about it, and now I get to show people about it. But I kind of always, just to finish this point, I guess, I kind of always see, thanks Al, so I always see kind of the AI stuff is a bit of a Trojan horse, like that the old story of the Trojan horse, when they that's how they got into the building. And I kind of see AI as that's how I get invited into schools, businesses, universities, and then when I'm in there, I don't just talk about AI, because I think, to be honest, it's at the minute it's a tool. Although I do talk about, and I talk about my new book, how it's probably going to go beyond any tool we've ever used before. But actually, I think the real message underneath that is this is just another example of how the world's changing, and how can we strategize for a better education system. So yeah, once I jump out the horse when I'm in the school, that's the message I try to get in there. If that makes sense.
No, I love that, Dan, and I think one of the reasons why I respect lots of different views, but there's a natural way that you align with certain people. And Matt and I have often had conversations around just where we are right now, and an education system that stubbornly refuses to adapt as quickly as it needs, or reflect on adaptation. And some of that's fear, some of that's just the system's not really designed to move. But it's that frustration that actually AI is just but one tool. But I absolutely support the view that sometimes you need to have a conversation about something that's disruptive to both education and the corporate workplace, in order to have a broader conversation about actually what's our curriculum now relevant to, how fit for office is it, what about skills, all the things. I mean, Matt, you deal with this firsthand in your school. The
language we're using here is quite interesting, because when we talk about the national curriculum and education system, and Dan said about, are we preparing kids for the future? Well, really not, based on our national curriculum. And I don't think the word adapted or adopting is I think it's too light touch. But then I think if we talk about disruption, then people automatically will battle back against that. So I wonder if we should be thinking of a word somewhere in the middle, but I can't think what that word is. But yeah, I mean, we teach the kids, and we're very lucky with a lot of support we get, and we're very lucky to have a very good tech teacher, how to use generative AI. I personally would teach them how to use Gemini and ChatGPT if they were old enough, or if they were allowed to at that age, because I think, well, I know, it's a vital skill for the future, and it's going to replace a lot of the stuff they're learning about in schools now, whether that is skills or knowledge, really. But I'm not sure adapting is brutal enough to sort of cover what we need to do to make our education system fit for purpose. And I'd be interested to know from Dan, like when you go to, the US and countries all over the world, as a nation, my perception is only based on England, but are we behind other nations, or are other nations more innovative?
I don't think it's by country. I think it's by kind of maverick schools, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like I've really, like you say, I get to travel a lot and talking to different schools and people who are in like different education departments and things around the world. All the same problems are there, really. I think probably Finland is probably the one that stands out as and that's mainly because they've got waiting lists for teachers who want to be trained to people who want to be trained to teachers. Like they literally have to stop people coming in because there's just so many people who want to be trained to teachers, and that's kind of the anomaly I've seen. I'm sure there's probably others as well, but yeah, I think the same pressures. Like go to the Netherlands and they're the complete opposite. They're literally having to shut down schools because there's not enough teachers. They're in a real crisis at the moment. Quite similar in the United States, although different states can be different. And then the United States have so many other pressures going on in terms of their politics and how they entwine religion and all of that as well. So yeah, there's a lot of similar pressures, I feel, but I come across kind of innovative schools or innovative educators who are pushing it a bit further, and I think that's the real difference, and that's what in my new book, Infinite Education, I kind of it's about the journey with those people and how to stand up against the crowd, really, and be what I call in the book a heretical leader. So go against what the kind of the mainstream logic is, and get people to think and start to creatively deconstruct this beast that we've created over the last few hundred years.
It's an interesting position, Dan. I mean, I think obviously you're talking to those that very much support that need to reflect and innovate and move conversations forward. I was researching a lot of education systems recently for work that I'm doing for my book, and one thing I noticed was it's often looking for the catalyst. So we often think about some of what are deemed high-performing school systems or flexible systems. We think of things like the Baltics, Estonia, and other countries, but often they've had a reason at some point in time where they've wanted to reset and redefine their curriculum. In the case of the Baltics, that's separation from the Soviet Union and that need to reflect a new curriculum that's more Western aligned. And often that's given them a reason to start with that blank slate and look what works well and what doesn't work well and develop. Whereas you typically find in more established education systems like the UK, the US, we end up with policy that tinkers around the edges, stuff that can be done and evidence within one electoral cycle. It's the reason is there to provide a positive. And so we do end up looking in all the developed education systems, or it feels, for where are the beacons schools, the beacon people, the people who are innovating. And then ironically, when we talk about all the different social tools that we use, much like we're doing here, actually they're the amplifier for us to find out about where there's great practice that we can actually say there's somebody who can help steer the direction of travel for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's why I started, co-started with Ben Whittaker and Steve Hope, the EduFuturist podcast, because we were, at the time when we first started, it was just me and Ben were working in a school in Lancashire in England, and we kind of started to have these ideas, and we thought, actually, there's got to be other people out there. So we kind of started the podcast just to get us in the door of these innovators around the world who were doing things differently. And I suppose that's what fueled me in terms of going, right, well, actually, people are doing it. It's not this dream. It's not this impossible task. It's people are literally around the world doing this, and we're quite lucky in the UK as well to have some amazing schools who have kind of deconstructed what it means to be education, and like I'm thinking mainly XP schools. They're doing some amazing work, and they're front of mind because they've just opened a school near where I live as well, where they totally deconstructed the curriculum and turned it into kind of cross-discipline projects that then have real-world impact because the projects they do affect their local communities and so on. So I think it can be done, but the pressures on the system make it so that the average leader, and I talked about heretical leader before, I think most leaders are in place because they're managers. And I think if you're a managing leader, it's really, really difficult. And especially if you've got around you other managers, it's really difficult to see beyond that unless you have like one of these heretics within your system. And even then, if you do, they're normally kept at arm's length away. So I think it's a bit of a mindset change there. And you know what? Sometimes it doesn't work. Like you talked about, like Estonia and other countries trying things out. As soon as you said that, I thought, like literally 50 miles up the road from me, probably closer for Matt, I think, is Scotland. They tried something. It doesn't seem to have entirely worked over the last few years, and now they're rethinking. But you know what? At least they had the balls to try something new and see, you know what, could we do something different here?
Alongside that, Dan, I mean, I'm sat here listening, and I'm thinking England, compared to Scotland, Wales is a fractured education sector. You know, you've got local authorities, you've got MATs, you've got so many different types of schools, and there's no one body to bring them together. So at least, like you say, Scotland tried, but they've got Digital Scotland and they've got, is it Glow in Scotland?
Yeah.
To sort of coordinate it. And in Wales, you've got HWB in Wales and the hub. Whereas in England, we the DFE don't seem to be trying to pull things together. So I think our sector and our education system's falling further behind other nations in the UK. When you see releases like £4 million to support teachers with AI tools, well, you've got thousands of schools without wireless infrastructure and devices. So, until you actually get everyone together and address the root problems, we're just going to keep.
Yeah, you got to. I think there's a big. I work alongside some of those guys sometimes in the Department of Education. I know you do, Al, as well. I think for those guys, they're in. If we think we're in a fractured place, so they're in like a much more fractured place, and I think they've got to be seen to be doing something, but then also they can't be doing a great deal because they're, as pretty much all government departments are, they're reactionary rather than proactive. So I think I've got a lot of sympathy with those guys. But what I say, if anybody asks me, because I tend to in England, a lot of school leaders will ask me like, "What's happening with the Department for Education?" And my one bit of advice is always just don't wait for them. Please don't wait for them because they're waiting for you. And then if you can put together a great example of how you're changing things, then they'll probably come to you. I think it has to be that way around. I think what you've touched on there is kind of there's two. I mentioned it in my new book. I think I mentioned it in the first book as well. The AI classroom. That I see innovation as two strands, and I got this from a guy called Vijay Govindarajan, who I studied under when I did a postgraduate diploma at MIT, and he talks about two different types of innovation. He talks about linear innovation and non-linear innovation. And the linear innovation is all about, well, what's the system that's already in place? He's talking about businesses, but I kind of applied it to education. So what's the system that's already in place? What's the procedures we've got? What's the metrics? What's the goal at the end of that? Within linear innovation, none of that changes. It's just how do we tweak it? How do we adjust that system to make it maybe a bit more effective? Maybe make it a bit faster. Maybe do it in less resources. Whatever it is, And in the typical, almost cliched example of that is the factory line. You know, you've got your raw materials, you've got your output at the end. And I mean, I looked this up actually. If you can get a job as a manufacturing consultant, so essentially somebody who goes into a factory, looks at that kind of first point to end point, and make suggestions for different tweaks to like save time and build in efficiency into that system. They get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars literally just for one project. Because if you think about it, Matt's taking notes now. If you think about it, like that could save a company like millions of pounds over a year or so if it works out to be really effective. And I think that's kind of what we do within education. Something new comes along. And the big example of that is ed tech, I guess. Something new comes along and you go, right, okay, this is great. It does have the potential to, and using that word again, disrupt a little bit, and maybe change how we think about education. But we'll take the bits that support the current system, please. And you've seen this. You see this a lot with ed tech products, like how an ed tech product normally breaks through into the market. And this, I'm generalizing a lot here, and then gets sanitized over time. Now you could argue, well, that's them. We're tweaking it to fit their audience and to they're getting feedback from their teachers and what they want. Yes, and that's how a business should work really. But what you get at the end is something that really just supports the current way of doing things. And that's just one example. And I'm not saying EdTech should drive the direction of pedagogy or anything like that, but it's almost like we miss these opportunities to rethink. And if you look at the wider businesses around the world, when something like technology advancements, let's say the breakthrough of mainstream internet, early 2000s, businesses have to change, and one of the key factors there is competition. So a business can't just go, oh great, we've got the internet now. Yeah, let's take a few bits of that. Let's see what can help us, but we'll just carry on really at business as usual, because another company will come along. I don't know, make an e-commerce site that'll then just blow them out of the water, let's say. The education system hasn't really had that. And even if someone's listening who's in an independent private school or a further education college or a university, you might say, well, they've had competition. Yeah, but it's pretty much, I mean, and I say this to their faces as well, it's pretty much the same. Like, there might be 5% of it that's little bit different. Maybe you've got a swimming pool and the other school hasn't or whatever. But the main package is pretty much the same. So, but I think what's going to happen is I think we're on the verge. In fact, we're not on the verge. We're already getting into this kind of new world of educational competition, and COVID kind of fueled it. So was it like in the UK, 1 in 5 students have not returned to school properly since COVID. There are parents out there who are buying, more than ever, buying homeschooling packages, who 1 day a week are taking their kids to, I mean, we've got an outdoor centre near us where 1 day a week they do a homeschooling day where homeschoolers can...
I visited a flexi school, Dan, last week in Jessop.
Right.
Run by the local authority, where most kids attend 3 days a week. And the school is fully funded for those, and it works very, very well for the families that attend. And
people want it, don't they? They're like,
it was very interesting, actually. Yeah, and it's only a small school, but the fact that it was an LA school as well, and they were supporting it, and the school
that's interesting.
In Key Stage 3 and 4 provision as well.
Right, but I think it is symptomatic of the fact that people want something a bit different. People, and also I think it probably reflects people's lives, like parents' lives, and like I travel quite a bit, and even our local primary schools, my 5 and 4-year-old go to the local primary school. Like, it's starting to become a bit too rigid for us and how we want to live as a family. And I'm thinking, what do we do? How do we deal with this? And so and the rise of online schools as well. Like, you look at Hugh Viney's school. Minerva's academy. It's the fastest growing school in England at the moment. So I think companies are going to step in and offer solutions, and I think we're already starting to see that. Some big American companies or startups that have become big in recent years are starting to do that. And I think we're going to get to a position where there's going to be alternatives for parents, for students, and that might not be a big online school. It might not be a big homeschooling package. It could be as simple as an artificial intelligence app on a phone. Sometimes when I'm speaking to teachers, I show off the Ray-Ban Meta sunglasses, and you can literally just say to it, tell me what I can see. I normally give an example where I get like an infographic of photosynthesis on the screen, and I just literally say to it, analyze this image, look at it. It takes a picture, analyze it, and I say, right, test me on it, and it throws questions my way, and I'd have like a bit of a chat with it, that's all technology. Like the new voice features within ChatGPT go way beyond what's in the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, but it'll catch up. Like, how long is it going to take until a parent is trying to get their kid out of bed in the morning to get to school, and the kid just goes, well, why do I need to go? I've got these. Like these teach me, these give me, these guide me on the skills I need. I know what I want to do in life. I know the job I want, and these are really helping me. Now, I'm not, again, another caveat, I'm not saying a pair of talking glasses replaces a school, but
Good.
It's about choice, though, isn't it, Matt? Dan, it's about flexibility,
Yeah.
And we've seen it. I kind of started from a position considering it, which was if you had your godlike powers and you were starting an education system again, what would you deliver? And as soon as you think about geography into the mix, you'd say it's impossible to have an amazing school in travelling distance of every child. So surely if you were starting again, part of what you'd offer would have to be something online that meant that no matter where a child lived, it would have access to high quality experiences, teaching and learning of some shape. Whether that's as well as, instead of, is very much based on the child, the choice, and all the other bits that goes with it. But the concept that I kind of always think, and I appreciate at school we're developing the child, not just their knowledge, but the concept that everything we do post 18 can be delivered online and for the rest of our lives. And we accept that. In the US last year, there were over 150,000 students who did degree courses that are 100% online, and the numbers are growing every year. The idea that couldn't possibly fit for a child that was 16 or 15 or 14, depending on all of their social emotional needs, their different learning styles, or frankly, just they didn't have access to quality education locally. For me, there has to be a hybrid. But there's a pushback which says, for a lot of people who value and trust the current status quo education system, and it's for us and them to decide whether they're right or wrong, there's always going to be a question, which is the role of technology diminishes the role of the educator. It's not something that we can trust. So how do you counter that, or how do you put that into context? Maybe it's fear, but the genuine question that gets pushed back.
I don't think it does replace, especially not at the minute. Now, I always caveat things like this with I find it difficult when I see blanket statements, especially online, and well, I think they're well-meaning, but I think there's a lot of sentiment embedded in there, and sentiment isn't necessarily real life. It's how we want things to be. So I think at the moment, like let's say ChatGPT is an example. It's not a replacement for a teacher. Like nowhere near. Anybody who's used it will know that. You've got to have so many skills to be able to evaluate it, to be able to. I mean, you literally need to. If you're going to use it for teaching, you need to be a professional teacher to be able to have the knowledge and skills to evaluate it and iterate on it and so on. So it's not a replacement, but some of the tools can work as a bit of a second best. So there's some educational tools out there that take that type of technology. They build some safeguards around it. They give it some instructions, and it might be able to help in a very, very narrow way give feedback on a specific task. Let's say where it's been trained on a model answer for that task. It can then use that, and now I don't think that means, well, we don't need the teacher now, because we'll just create tons and tons of these narrow focused AI tools that focus on different tasks. Because it's second best. I think the teacher still needs to step in. As we know, learning or designing learning is a sequential process. It's a very complex, and I think we probably do the profession a real disservice when we start to narrow it down into just right. That information needs to be taught. Well, surely an AI can do it because it can speak, it can test. But it's the designing of learning and this sequential process of learning. I think still needs to be oversaw by the human. At the minute, and I'm going to caveat that, I don't know if we'll ever get there. But at the minute, it still needs the human teacher there to look at it. So yeah, absolutely. I think this is the thing, like. And I suppose it's what the internet does really well, especially social media, is turns everything into a zero-sum game. So it's like, it's either or, okay, you're advocating AI in education, so you must hate teachers because you don't want teachers to have a job, and you want AI robots in classrooms. It's like straight to the dystopian future, and vice versa, right? Yeah. Saw an article yesterday where someone was saying, well, let's just get it all out of the classroom. It shouldn't be in the classroom, and it should just be the human. And I'm like, there's a middle ground. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, and I know it gets likes, it gets hits, it gets retweets, whatever you're looking for, and I know forming a polarized position, especially on somewhere like social media, is good for getting your message out, and but. As we all know, the answer's always somewhere in the middle, isn't it?
I feel like I should take your advice now and put some social media posts out that I like to eat polar bears for breakfast, just to get the opposing view. I think what you shared there is really, really salient, Dan, because there is a natural. I think we're programmed as humans. You know, we're either one faith or another, one football team or another. And when it comes to some new big conversation about something significant, and of course AI and the broader picture about, I'm going to perhaps move us on to talk about skills, because that's very much at the heart of a lot of this. There's a natural persuasion to fall into one camp or the other without really recognizing that all the cool stuff is where people are actually unpicking it, trying it, using it, figuring out what's smoke and mirrors, figuring out what actually has positive impact. And the thing that I always come back to, looking at so many educators that I respect around the world, is everything's built on evidence, but you've got to try something to accumulate the evidence. The idea that we don't try something completely removes the ability to get quality evidence one way or the other.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think anybody who actually works with teachers or is a teacher on the ground knows that actually the kind of social media conversations and that don't really reflect reality, because the teacher on the ground is a complex being, is a complex person who is trying things out, who's not just like, right, in my mind I'm a traditional teacher, I use the chalkboard and that's it. Like there's no like, a teacher tries things, and normally a teacher has a very limited scope within that because of the pressures of time and so on. And if it doesn't deliver straight away, it goes to the back of the mind and usually doesn't get tried ever again. I find that when let's say I'm with a school and I say who's used a tool like ChatGPT, more and more it's kind of hovering around like the 90-95 percentile of hands that go up. But then I ask, well, who's using it every day? Who's actually start, and literally within a room of about 200 you can get 5 people put their hand up, and so there's a big disconnect there. And I think it's because teachers, I think it's 2 reasons. I think the first reason is a lot of ed tech, no, not all ed tech, but a lot of ed tech is kind of overpromised, or the hype around it is overpromised and under-delivered over the last few decades. I think number 2, therefore, there's a little bit of a mistrust around some teachers of going, well, is this actually going to help me? Because the last 100 tools didn't really change what I was doing. And also, I think there's a mind shift when it comes to using these tools. You can't just press a few buttons and get what you need out of it. You've literally got to have a conversation with it. It's not a technical skill, it's a communication skill. And as soon as you don't start using a tool like this and you're not really getting much out of it, well, the bell's just gone and I've got to teach my next class. And so then you're probably not going to go back to it. So I think it's great when I get to go into schools, and I know lots of other great people who do similar work where you get to just sit down. Their teachers have given them their head teacher, their principal has given them a few hours off the timetable to really just understand how to use this, and how to get results a bit faster. And it's normally down to, and I say this to teachers, it's down to the skills they already have. It's just the mind shift of going, the communication and skills, and the skills I even use with my students. Like if we take like an example like modelling, teachers every day are modelling answers to their students, modelling behaviour, modelling. And like if you take that skill and you start using it with AI, you can start getting some phenomenal results. So I think it's just that mind shift. But yeah, it's a complex world, especially when there's so many different AI tools now as well. To cut through it all and go, right, well, which ones are going to help? Which ones should I actually dedicate a bit of time to? As we know, teachers get literally only a few hours of CPD time across the year. Is it going to be used wisely? Yeah, it's complex.
How do you keep on top of it all, Dan? In terms of today, there's 15 new AI tools that.
I suppose the big part of it is listening to the teachers, like going, right, well, is learning from them. So the tools, let's say if I'm doing a workshop and I'm showing them some tools that are have an impact, that's not me just going on, let me pick my 5 favourite tools here. It's me going, right, actually I've got a few different methods, but the first one is I get to travel around a lot, and I get to go to conferences, and I hear what teachers are using and starting to get impact out of. And then I've been out of the classroom, I think 2-3 years now, but I can still pick up a tool and go, yeah, that would have worked really well. So there's my own intuition there. And then there's the third bit, which is I've got a website, which is AIeducator.tools, which has, it's like a repository for loads of AI tools on there. And I get to see the data behind it as well. So I can see like which ones are getting clicked on the most, which ones are getting looked into the most. So it's kind of a mixture of a few things where I go, actually, these ones seem to be having the most impact. And so and also the reaction from teachers. Teachers don't put up with bullshit lightly. So if I show them something once, and you can genuinely see from the reaction of the teachers, they know if that's going to be helpful, that's not going to be helpful. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a process, but trying to narrow it down into the tools that are, and then also you've got the added bit on there of the country you're in. Is it GDPR compliant? Is it FERPA compliant? And all of that is another layer on there, which is obviously really important. But yeah, that's how I work with it at the moment.
We've got some slightly bigger questions, the ones that we like to chew over, and sometimes are the trigger for a grumpy old man moment on a social media platform. And sometimes it's the things where we're just trying to figure out, is this obvious to others? So there's a couple of questions. One is, you are now officially Minister of Infinite Education for a day. What would you prioritise in terms of the first thing that you would look at the UK education system as being the priority for us to review?
Oh, that's a good one.
Put you on the spot there.
It's just for a day. So I think what we need to do is have an honest conversation about what is the purpose of education. I think that would probably be the first thing we need to do, because it ultimately would all everything else would have to stem from that, and I don't think we actually have an answer to that. I think we've got 1,000,001 different answers to it from whoever you speak to, but as a society, I don't think we've actually got a true answer to that. And I think the students themselves, the parents, business people in the local community will hold just as much, their answers will hold just as much importance as people within education as well.
What would you get rid of, Dan, if you could get rid of something in education?
Oh, Matt's doing his Room 101 moment now.
Yeah, I've got 76 things to get rid of. What the one thing for Dan?
I might cop out with this one because I think it depends on the school. Like, because honestly, some things might be really working for a school, and I think that's probably one of the things, and it's one of the points I really try to drive home in the new book, is that innovation should happen within the school walls in terms of like, well, what do we need to do? It's not like somebody else coming down and going. So I preface the book by saying it's a strategy book, but it's not one of those books where I'm going to say, right, this is how to structure your strategy. This is what you need to put in it. This is the headings for your document type thing. Now, those are relevant. We need those, and they help a lot of people. But it's more of a playbook for how do you get a group of people together within your organisation and build and strategize for innovation from the ground up. And I think it's those people who are going to need to make the decisions about what stays and what goes on an individual school level, I think.
There's always a part of me that thinks if we could just get rid of the curriculum and accountability for 2 years, that would facilitate every school to actually do what you're just referring to there, wouldn't it? And it would inform next steps for everywhere, really.
Yeah. I don't know, because I suppose you need to build a big structure around that and support, because you'd probably get 99% of schools just carry on doing the same as what they always did. In fact, I was reading a case study about, I can't remember it now. It was somewhere in America where they did something similar. Where about 20 years ago, this is really vague, but I was researching it for the book, where they kind of said, right, you're going to have the freedom to do different types of education and learning. And it was within the state system in America, and 99% of them just carried on doing exactly what they would always been doing. Like even like, I'm not sure if it was the curriculum or not, but let's say it was, even the curriculum, they said you don't have to do anymore. But 99% of them just carried on doing it anyway. So I think there'd have to be a lot of support in getting people to the point where they start to think innovatively and look at what. I think one of the problems is there's so much going on within the school building that how often does the average school teacher get to look out the window at the horizon and think about these questions we're talking about? Like I've got teachers in my family, mainly Julia's side of the family. All her family are teachers, and I don't really have these conversations that often with them, because I think a lot of people are just, they go to work and they come home. They're not. It's not consuming them. It's not them. They're not. A lot of teachers aren't thinking, how do I turn the system on its head and rethink it. So
There's a mindset.
I haven't answered your question.
Well, you know what? Sometimes questions, in an honest sense, don't have an immediate answer. And I think for many, there's a sense of, I couldn't possibly change the system in my role, so I'm just not going to go there. Whereas we recognise that actually sometimes it's about, well, an individual may feel that way, but when you bring lots of individuals together and find ways to share and evidence what you're proposing, it starts to move the tide. And that often feels, frankly, certainly within our local context, that feels like an impossible task. But it does happen, and it's about, sometimes there's a bit of luck and judgment, because it's partly about bringing the right voices together, which I know many are already trying to do, and it's partly about timing, where government officials, those who are consistently there in government, are actually receptive to change. There's a political ambition, the funding aligns with the story, or you're in America and you find out that the former CEO of WWE is going to take over as your Secretary of State of Education,
just to dismantle it as well, apparently, just to get rid of it.
We've been on that journey. I spent many years living and working in the States, and one thing for me that I always kind of reflected on is every state has its own different nuance. There is different political funding depending on the status of schools, the charter schools conversation, frankly, whether it's a red or a blue state, the list goes on. And so I really empathise with educators in a school system there that's also under huge pressure, that it can feel like it doesn't really matter how innovative or how strongly I think about something, who's going to listen to me. You know,
Yeah.
And I think the who's listening is why different platforms and conversations are really important. Dan, I'm really conscious of time. We could chew the fat for hours, but I think the most important thing to take away, because Matt and I want to carry this conversation on with lots of voices from around the world and just get some sense of common ground, things that perhaps need to be on the radar. But we also want to signpost good people and make sure that other people can connect and have the same conversation with you or find out more. So you're one very chunky book here, which Dan and I think will vouch. The AI Classroom is fab, and you've got your new book coming out in January that we're all really looking forward to, and I know it will follow a similar theme of considered, structured, and that approach that people are looking for. How can they connect with you and find out more?
Yeah, so if people are interested in the new book, it's called Infinite Education: The 4-Step Strategy for Leading Change in the World of Artificial Intelligence. So it's really kind of, again, it's taken the baseline of, well, we're in this world now. How do we? And it's the conversations we've been having. How do we start to make change happen? And the first half of the book is kind of bringing together the why. Is the why do we need to change? Because I think even just that is, I suppose, literally what we were just talking about. Some people never even question whether the education system is right or not. I mean, I think for a lot of people it's just infallible. It's just, well, that's what you do. You teach these subjects, you get through it. So it's pulling together the why. Would we need change? That's the first half of the book. The second half of the book is all about, well, how do you do it? And it's very practical. It's kind of aimed at somebody in a school who wants to be that innovator. And so I write it from a leadership point of view, but it's really for anybody who wants to be a leader tomorrow as well. And it's how do you get a group of people together? It's kind of like when I was working in education. It's the guide I wish I'd had. It's the playbook to try and make change happen. So yeah, it's called Infinite Education: The 4-Step Strategy for Leading Change in a World of Artificial Intelligence. And you can go to infiniteeducation.ai, infiniteeducation.ai, and that will get you on the wait list. If you join the wait list, you'll also get a bonus chapter when the book comes out on the 6th of January. And I'll also inform you about the pre-sale and all of that kind of thing as well. And there's going to be a big, what do you call it? Like the word's just got out of my head now. Like an exercise book, like to accompany it as well, so you can do everything in the book. And write in it as you go and keep a record of everything. So, so 6th of January will be out. And if you go to infiniteeducation.ai, if you want to know about kind of my wider work, my main website is the AIeducator.io. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always, Dan. It's been a pleasure. It's nice to be the other way around, where you're the one doing all the talking. But really appreciate you making time for us on our first episode. This is the bit where we find out that I didn't hit record or that I was saying the wrong thing. Matt's diligently checking, thinking, let's just make sure he hasn't broken anything. But listen, just from a personal point of view, keep up doing the stuff you're doing, mate. I can't tell you how impressed I am with how you've managed to spread the love and share advice on such a global landscape so quickly. So huge kudos to you on that.
Thank you. And yeah, being inspired by great people like you two as well is always helps, and it's and the same to you guys as well. Keep up the amazing work, and I can't wait to see where the podcast goes. And I'll be listening.
Thank you.